Hello, my name is Brant Hunt. My channel is simply called Discerning What is True. I'm trying to talk to you from another book by Bill Mcgraw. Um, Good guy who lives in Panama, and I like this guy very much. I've listened to quite a bit of his videos, and we're going to talk about Alzheimer's disease, that is reversing it. So let's get into it, okay? Okay, today is the ninth day of February 2025. It is a sad fact that one of three people in the United States over the age of 80 years old will die of Alzheimer's disease or AD. Modern medicine will tell you it is just a part of getting old and there is no cure. However, there are places on this planet where people don't get this dreaded disease, and an extraordinary number of them live very happily, that is, lives beyond the age of 100 years old. These are what they called, or famed, what we call blue zones, end quote. It all comes down to two elements, basically: aluminum toxicity, which is the primary cause, and silica, which is the primary cure, and a readable accessibility element for the prevention of Alzheimer's disease. The purpose of this document is to review all the pertinent research published in scientific journals that shows that aluminum is toxic in certain areas of the brain, causing Alzheimer's disease by destroying certain types of important proteins. I will also describe those studies that show that by including silica, SILICA, in the diet, you can not only prevent Alzheimer's or AD, but actually reverse the symptoms and experience a full recovery. When searching on the internet for how AD is defined, we can find three basic categories. The first stage term is called mild. It's obviously very serious and goes well beyond the typical, quote, brain fog, end quote, that so many people experience today. The first stage requires intervention. However, it is completely reversible. The second stage listed below is called moderate. It is obviously, quote, full-blown AD, while, quote, severe is obviously a terminal ill patient. The three definitions below are from NIH webpage. The first one will be mild AD. As AD worsens, people experience greater memory loss and often cognitive difficulties. Problems can be simply including wandering and getting lost, trouble handling money and paying bills, repeating questions, taking longer to complete a normal daily task, and personality and behavior changes. People are often diagnosed in this stage. The moderate AD in this stage is what we call damage occurs in areas of the brain that control language, reasoning, conscious thought, and sensory processing, such as the ability to correctly detect sounds and smells. Memory loss and confusion grows worse, and people begin to have problems recognizing family and friends. They may be unable to learn new things, carry out multi-step tasks such as getting dressed, or cope with new situations. In addition, people at this stage may have hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia, and may behave impulsively. Severe AD ultimately plaques and tangles spreads throughout the brain, and brain tissue shrinks significantly. People with severe AD cannot communicate and are completely dependent on others for their care. Near the end of their life, the person may be in bed most of all their time as the body shuts down. Explanation from modern medicine. According to the NIH, the causes of Alzheimer's is caused by genetic variations and environmental and lifestyle factors. Obviously, this is not very definite and helpful, but still a better description than what is the typical response of old age. Again, from the NIH, quote, in people with early on AD, a genetic mutation may be the cause. Lania said AD arises from, that's spelled LATEO, late onset, quote, AD arises from a complex series of brain changes that may occur over decades. The causes probably include a combination of genetics, environmental, and lifestyle factors. There is a genetic link where an APOE gene variation, as A is in apple, P is in Paul, O is in orbit, E is in elephant. Variation increases amyloid beta protein, that's ABP, which creates more possible plaques by increasing the bindings of toxic results in the death of neurons. Next section is called Research on the History and Causes of, quote, AD. As expected, when examining the research, there is a very different story that anyone can find if you know where to look. I was able to find 25 important research studies that clearly demonstrates that, quote, the issue of AD toxicity in the human brain causes AD. In particular, aluminum in drinking water is clearly linked to people developing symptoms of Alzheimer's. So here's what he just said here. So there are people complaining about fluoride. Yes, I agree, it's a problem, but most people are not even aware of what's going on with their water. That is aluminum. Disease and studies shows the intake of silica on a long-term regular basis proves that aluminum can be removed and AD can be completely reversed. As usual, there is a very interesting story of how AD came about and how, quote, AD was recognized as being the main toxic involved. The story actually begins in the early 1900s. AD is named after Dr. Alois Alzheimer. In 1906, Dr. Alzheimer noticed changes in the brain tissue of a woman who had died of an unusual mental illness. Her symptoms included memory loss, language problems, and unpredictable behavior. After she died, he examined her brain and found many abnormal clumps, which are called amyloid plaques, and tangled bundles of fiber, now called neural fibrillary tangles. Only 5 years later, the first published study would link AD with the issue of aluminum toxicity. Since 1911, experimental evidence has repeatedly demonstrated that chronic aluminum intoxication reproduces neuropathological hallmarks of AD. This is from the Journal of Alzheimer's Disease in 2011. In addition to aluminum, that is, iron and copper were also shown to cause toxicity in the brain, as these heavy metals, although being necessary for human health, could also be very destructive to nerve tissue in large amounts. High levels of iron were reported in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease also in 1953. That's in 1953. So that's 7 years before I was born. So this has been known approximately for over 70 years. Since that time, it has been shown that iron as well as copper are associated with hallmark Alzheimer's proteins, amyloid, and tau plaques, that's TAU plaques, in the brain, along with the development of free radicals. Some elements as high concentration can be oxidated, while others, like selenium, are powerfully antioxidants. Yes, that's right. The mineral selenium is an antioxidant. In 1965, a classic study was published that irrevocably linked AD to aluminum toxicity. So this has been known for a long time, folks. They've kept it in the dark. So aluminum is the form of vaccine adjutant caused the degradation of brain tissue. This is from a person called KLATZO, etc. Showed that the intracerebral administration of aluminum to experimental animals induced neurofibrillary degeneration and the appearance of tangle-like structures that were similar to the NFT found in the brains of AD patients. That is from the Journal of Neuropathological and Experimental Neurology, 1965. They've known about it, folks, for 59 years. Actually, it'll be 60 years. Aluminum in tap water and dialysis medication causes aluminum disease, or AD. So already we can see that over 55 years ago, now it's 60 since this book has been written, scientists knew that aluminum was involved in causing the classic signs of AD. It was not long before another scientific paper, this time in one of the world's most famous journals would link aluminum and AD in humans. The Journal of Science, 1973, reported an increased level of aluminum in the brains of AD patients by stating, quote, aluminum concentrations approaching those used experimentally have been found in some regions of the brains of patients with AD, end quote. Sources of aluminum that could cause AD were aluminum in drinking water as alum, ALUM, or aluminum sulfate, which has been used to remove particles out of domestic water since the 1700s. Also, alum, ALUM, is used in baking powder. That is in Europe. The use of alum to increase clarity in drinking water would become the biggest source of aluminum toxicity, creating AD. But first, as we continue along our timeline, a surprising source of aluminum causing AD was identified in retina dialysis patients. The balance between dietary intake and excretion of phosphorus can be impaired in patients with decreased retina functions, leading to hyperphosphatedness. Aluminum-based phosphate binder gels are administered orally in dialysis patients to minimize phosphate accumulation, and some parts of the aluminum in these medications may be absorbed and bioaccumulated. Aluminum in dialysis solution or pharmacology compounds were found to cause dementia in dialysis patients. This is known as dialysis encephalopathic, and it was reported in one of their most widely known and respected medical journals in the world in 1976. It was reported in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1976. So the idea of aluminum causing AD was known, but why didn't everyone exposed to aluminum develop AD? Well, the same reason why not all people with mercury amalgam fillings become mercury toxic. People detoxified or removed toxins at various rates. People detox at different rates based on the ability to produce glutathione, which is the body's natural chelator. These are good detoxifiers, you see. Young people are 1/3 of the population, that is. Meanwhile, about 1/3 of any given population are moderates detoxifiers, and 1/3 are poor detoxifiers and likely have lots of inflammation. That means inflammation simply you have a burning feeling around you. It has to do with arthritis, rheumatoid, bursitis, those type of things. Well, that's you're on fire. You're actually just meaning that your pH is way too high. Low glutathione and experienced symptoms of chronic disease. This last 1/3 category are those most likely to develop AD from aluminum exposure. By 1988, there was the first environmental disaster with aluminum in drinking water that would show how dangerous using aluminum in water treatment could be. In Camelford, CAMELFORD, England, a accidental release of high amounts of aluminum sulfate in drinking water caused short-term memory loss, problems concentrating and body aches in 20,000 people. 2 years later, 400 out of the 20,000 people were still affected, and 3 years later, 55 people still had symptoms. From those chronically toxic 40 people who were exposed to higher amounts of aluminum in drinking water were compared to 15 people in the area that were not exposed to aluminum in tap water. People not exposed to aluminum had significantly less symptoms of AD. The story was coming out how aluminum used in domestic water treatment could be dangerous. The following year, the first long-term study showing how aluminum in tap water can cause AD was published in the biggest medical journal in the UK. In the survey of 88 county districts within England and Wales, rates of Alzheimer's disease in people under the age of 70 years old, I should say, were estimated from the records. Aluminum concentration in water over 10 years were obtained from water authorities and water companies. The risk of Alzheimer's AD was 1.5 times higher in districts where the mean aluminum concentration exceeded 0.11 milligrams per liter, compared to districts where concentrations were less than 0.01 milligram per liter. There was no evidence of a relation between other causes of dementia or epilepsy and aluminum concentrations in water. That's based upon Lancet, LANCET, in 1989. This would become one of the most important studies in establishing the link between aluminum and AD. The aluminum concentration of 0.1 milligrams of liter above milligram/liter would then show up in many other studies and would be a benchmark for aluminum toxicity in tap water. In other words, if you drank tap water with this amount of aluminum or more, you were very vulnerable to development of AD. This is from Journal of Inorganic Biochemistry, based upon, that is in year 2009. Focusing on aluminum in tap water, again, a 2-year study during 1985 and 86 in 2 areas of Newfoundland, that's Newfoundland, England, was conducted to compare people who died of dementia, focusing on the amount of aluminum in the drinking water. Quote, it was found that aluminum in tap water significantly contributed to mortality due to dementia. That is from Journal of Epidemiology, I should say, and Community Health, 1991. These 2 studies from England set a precedent for future studies of aluminum in tap water causing AD. It would be found to be true for another dozen future studies. Unfortunately, it had little impact as AD would go on to become the biggest killer of the elderly. In 1994, one of the largest and possibly the most impressive studies linking aluminum and water and AD was conducted. A significant relationship was found in 3,777 people living in France over the age of 65 between aluminum in drinking water when related to calcium and pH and cognitive impairment. A follow-up study conducted 8 years later showed that the aluminum in tap water at 0.1 milligrams/liter concentration was significantly responsible for causing Alzheimer's in 253 AD patients. American Journal of Epidemiology, I should say, 2000. About the same time, the same journal would publish another study from Canada involving 68 AD patients, which also determined that aluminum in drinking water was significantly associated with the onset of AD, from the American Journal of Epidemiology, 2009. In Ontario, it is estimated that 19% of the population was exposed to residue aluminum greater than or equal to 0.1 milligrams/liter. This level of aluminum in drinking water has been correlated with AD in many studies, neurology in 1996. The largest study ever conducted on relationship between aluminum in drinking water and the development of AD was from Canada and published in 2021 in Neurotoxicology. This study involved an impressive group of people, over 10,263 people, over 10 years, with a follow-up of 3,638 people with 240 AD identified. There was a correlation between increased aluminum in the drinking water and the development of AD. P equals 0.13, and taking the APOE gene variation into account, there was significant trend. AI equals AD. And P is less than 0.05. During this time, a rapid aluminum and AD development, equipment and procedures were invented to analyze brain tissue for aluminum concentration. The cores of senile plaque in the brain, which are the classic signs of AD, were determined to contain 30 to 50 parts per million milligrams/L aluminum, which is a very low level of aluminum. It was determined at this time that aluminum studies that could not detect the small amounts were involved inconclusively. Were involved inconclusively. So this is based upon Journal of Inorganic Biochemistry in 2009. In another science journal during the same year, it was shown that aluminum toxicity in the human brain causes an increase in production of amyloid beta protein. That is a natural repair protein, which increases likelihood of developing AD. Imaging studies identify aluminum deposits in all brain tissue studied. They were predominantly co-located with amyloid beta in plaque in people with AD. And he has a place you can go to actually research this, and you can open up the file. Aluminum specifically, that is, fluorescent successfully identify aluminum in brain tissue in both intracellular and extracellular locations. The associated aluminum with corporal amyloidaceae, the area of the brain, suggests a role for aluminum in neurodegeneration in MS. This is from International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health, dated 2018. So that's roughly 7 years ago. In a paper from Brain Pathology in 2016, aluminum was associated with neurodegenerative disease such as AD amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and dialysis encephalopathy. Sorry if I butchered that one, folks. Aluminum causes the accumulation of tangle, tau protein, and AB protein in the brain of experimental animals. By this time, information was being made available of sources of aluminum in the diet and elsewhere. For example, mammals transfer aluminum from mother to offspring through breast milk, and this aluminum ends up in the brain and remains there throughout the life of the offspring. Journal of Inorganic Biochemistry, 2009. So he's got another section here. It starts, remove aluminum from the brain and reverse the symptoms of Alzheimer's, or AD. Urine is the main route of elimination, and the elimination half-life of aluminum depends on kidney function and level of exposure. Following acute exposure, it is the order of days, but it may be much longer in chronic exposure. At the half-life of aluminum in the brain is 7 years, meaning it will take 7 years to remove 50% of the aluminum. I'll say that again, folks. It will take 7 years to remove 50% of the aluminum. Luckily, as you will read below, silica, which Mr. Krauss talks about also, which has a formula to deal with this. The second most abundant element in the Earth's crust and a natural chelator element for aluminum in certain forms, such as orthosilicatic acid. It has been proven to prevent and reverse the symptoms of Alzheimer's, or AD. In studies published in 2009 in the American Journal of Epidemiology, 1,925 people were measured for their cognitive decline according to the amount of aluminum in their drinking water. Again, this was based less than 0.1 milligrams/L during a 15-year period. The symptoms of AD were significantly greater in people who had a higher daily intake of aluminum in their drinking water. Conversely, people in a study who drank water with at least 10 milligrams/L of silica had a significant reduced risk of dementia. This would be one of the studies showing the benefits of silica water reducing aluminum and treating AD. A study published in the well-known and respected Lancet LANCET journal compared aluminum intake with and without silica in water at a normal level. This study proved that silica intake significantly reduces aluminum in the blood by 85%, caused by gastrointestinal binding. In other words, this study shows that if you ingest silica while ingesting aluminum at the same time, you will bind a majority of aluminum before any of it absorbs through the gut. The biggest study comparing the development of AD and silica content is in drinking water. It's from a study in 2005. During this study, 7,598 women with an average age of 75 years old were analyzed for cognitive performance, and it was determined that those who had low silica in their water were significantly more likely to develop AD. This is American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, 2005. This is one of the most convincing studies showing how the consumption of silica can reverse the symptoms of AD. Quote, performance to a cognitive test were possibly correlated to the consumption of silica, and that the risk of AD was reduced in subjects who had the higher daily silica intake compared to the others, end quote. In the Journal of Nutrition in 2005, an experiment was conducted to see what the effects of silica would be on the neurofibrillary tangles that form, causing AD. Remarkably, silica was able to reverse the tangles, making them potentially normal and functioning again. The authors in this study stated, quote, model tangles and precipitated beta pleated sheets of 7 ETA, capital A and 4, can be reversed to soluble forms by silicates, end quote. Almost 10 years ago, what I would consider the most important study ever conducted on the development of AD and the curative effect of orthosilica acid solution, which is normally a form of silicon in water, and reversing the symptoms of AD while reducing the amount of aluminum in the human body, was published. This study would answer the questions that so many aluminum toxic people I treat always ask me, quote, how long do I have to drink this water before I see a change, end quote. According to the study comparing AD patients with controls, quote, Drinking up to 1 liter of silicate-rich mineral water each day for 12 weeks facilitates the removal of aluminum via the urine in both patient and control groups without any concomitant effect upon the urinary excretion of the essential metals, iron, and copper. We have provided a preliminary evidence that over 12 weeks of silicon-rich mineral water therapy, the body burden of aluminum fell in individuals with Alzheimer's disease, and at the quote, the same time, cognitive performance showed clinically relevant improvements. This is from Journal of AD, Alzheimer's disease, 2013. Meanwhile, another amazing study was administered a measured amount of aluminum to the diet to rats and then analyzing the whole body to see where the aluminum ended up would reveal some of the most interesting information on AD that I have ever learned. This study published would demonstrate that 85% of the total amount of aluminum that accumulates in the body from the diet was actually found in the brain after analysis. You see, it goes right there. That's why people struggle. You see, it's not in other parts of the body. You see, that's more than 3/4. Meanwhile, silica added to the diet with aluminum would bond the aluminum and prevent it from being absorbed. So in effect, we can say that most of the aluminum stored in our bodies is in our brain. That's from Biology Trace Elements Research in 1996. The next section is called the blue zone. Perhaps one of the most fascinating studies of AD, aluminum and silica can be found in studies on the blue zones. The blue zones have been named for areas of the world where an abnormally high level of people live beyond the age of 100 years old. And people there do not get sick like they do in the modern world. Some of the most well-known areas that are blue zones are the islands of Okinawa, Sardinia, and the Nicola Peninsula in Costa Rica. Some of the statistics reported from the blue zones are mind-blowing and increasing. I don't know why you didn't show the other one here, because the other one's actually off the coast of Greece, which is in the Mediterranean. So there are 2 places in the Mediterranean Sea. There's one actually in the Central America, and then one all the way in the south of Japan. If you live outside of the blue zones, there was only a 25% chance of living past 100. That's a big deal. It was revealed that the higher the level of OSA, which is silicon, in the drinking water, the more you have the blue zone effect. This is exactly what was reported in all of the many studies summarized in this document. There is a 80% increase in arthrosclerosis in people living outside the blue zone compared to people living in a blue zone. This has been explained by the effect that silica in the diet has on people by increasing the elasticity of arteries and other tissues. So in other words, this is a mineral, folks. Okay, that's what it is. No one knows what it's about. Same thing with, and this is not in the book, but it's also the same thing to deal with the issue of iodine. Most people don't have iodine in their diets either. You see. Okay, so we continue on. If you live in the United States, there's a 5 times higher chance of being affected by heart disease and a 7 times higher chance of developing prostate cancer compared to people living in the blue zone. We have to remember here that the diet of blue zone people does not include processed and fast foods and includes lots of organic vegetables. People living on the island of Ikaria, blue zone island, have 50% the rate of heart disease compared to Americans. I think this is the island actually off the coast of Greece. Blue zone people have a breast and prostate cancer rate of 80% less compared to the people living in the United States. For more information, please review the information below regarding how to make your own silica rich or silica acid or OSA for pennies a liter, or just look it up on YouTube. Some final advice would be just consume more organic fruits and vegetables at the table below shows. Green beans, oatmeal, and some grains. For more information on avoiding aluminum in the diet and reversing the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, please have a look at my other book here, which is simply called AD, an easy solution you can find. You can probably find that with Kindle by the same author. Table 2, source of silica in the diet. Important sources are in bold from the book Aluminum Detox, an easy solution in 2021. Type what we call milligrams per 100% G percentage absorption. Green beans is at 2.5. Okay, so it's 50%, I guess it is. Is that right? So green beans are the best one that actually has supposedly silica in it. You have bananas, you have spinach, as the list goes on, rice. It doesn't say brown or white, so I don't know why it's not sharing that. Grains, lentils, pasta, fruit, beans, mussels, whole oats. I assume this is barley, potatoes, and corn. So these sources are from, as he's got here, is from, see here, he has the sources here. At the bottom here it says Chris Esley, E-X-L-E-Y, from Dennis Krause, C-R-U-S-E, and Burke Eppen Gartner, that's E-H-G-A-R-T-N-E-R. Okay, and I think this is pretty much this is all the notes, the biography notes here at the end here he has sharing. So that, I think, is the end of the particular book here. It's a very short read, again, from Mr. Mcgraw. Yeah, that's it. So I wanted to share this with you guys. I think it's terribly important that we know this. We're not being told this at all. No one knows anybody knows about this. They just say, "Oh, it's old age." No, it's not. No, it's not. So this is important for you to look into. Again, there's a way of making this for yourself. You can make silica water yourself, or you can get it from a company called what they call Fiji water, which has silica in it also. But it is far more expensive, that route, than actually doing it yourself. So thank you for being here, and I appreciate your attention and wish you the best. Take care.